is in a rainforest you don't have a very deep soil like in this country. If you look at a tree like that, it has a very narrow stem because it can root right down. But in a forest they have buttresses, and that because the trees there are balancing. So you have a very small substrate, and that means that the soil has lots of leaf litter. So in order to make it more like a rainforest, we're going to put handfuls of bark and mix it up. So if they don't like their feet in what you call heavy soils, they don't like their feet to be too wet. They like quick draining soils. So by putting the bark in, that helps that out. What you call slow release fertiliser. Right, and this has 3 important things in it. It has just a bit of science for you. It has nitrogen in it, and phosphorus, and potassium. And if you remember this, you'll be very impressed. Nitrogen helps leaves grow, phosphorus helps roots grow, and potassium helps flowers and fruit. So this is Sunday lunch for plants. Now this is quite good, this stuff, because it will gradually break down over 6 months. So in 6 months' time you need to put some more in. Some more meat and 2 veg. It just looks like a sandwich, it looks like a gatto. A little bit more, we're nearly there for planting. Let's talk about rainforest. What we're doing here, we're going to make a mini rainforest, yeah? That's why we've got the bark mixed with the soil.
1, 2, 3, 4 layers.
It's pretty much, well, we're going to have 3 here, but that's very well known, because exactly, rainforests grow in what you call tiers. So in fact they'll do two things they'll go in tiers. You have a bigger layer, like we say, a middle layer, and a ground layer. But also you have things called epiphytes, which are plants that grow on other plants. So first of all we need our big plants. So if you have something like this, maybe you have that as a centrepiece, that's a palm tree. In a hole. Right, now, when you get a plant, always grip it by the base. What I'll do is, if any size plant, then I'll probably tip it upside down, knock this pot off, and I've got a firm grip of that plant. See, that plant's not going anywhere. See, if it's a smaller one, just hold it much more lightly around the bottom. What's quite important is, I'm just going to tease those roots out as well, because I want the plant to be excited about all this new soil it's got to grow into. But sometimes you get a lot of thick roots on a plant, and if you don't do this, the roots don't start to grow. It's a thing called spiralling. Okay? Put that in the centre like so. Right, so I'm going to put this soil back round now. This is the most important part of planting, right? Right, I'm going to take the ends of my fingers, and I want to put out all those air pockets where I put that soil back. See, so I'm pushing all that soil down into place. And the reason I'm doing that is a thing called capillary action, and that means the water moving through the soil. If I don't firm that down, there's lots of air in there, the plant won't be able to take up its water and won't be able to drink properly. So you've got to make sure when you're planting anything, the most important thing is to firm that soil down. Hold it by the hands. Just going to tip it right upside down. We'll take that pot off and you can loosen the roots, fella. Right, okay mate, so now, again, remember I told you, to hold it on the bottom like that. Nice and gently, tip it upside down. Take the pot off. See, there's got a lot of roots. Tease those roots out. You alright there, fellas? Yeah. Good stuff. That's good. Now we've got to put the soil back around that root ball and start firming it in. Yeah, it's alright. Let me have a look. It's because there were 2 plants there, weren't there? That's because look. You see how much air I can push out of that? So if you can firm that down, and then what I'll do is I'm going to get you some steaks.
Steaks?
Yeah. So with chips, tomatoes. Just want to keep these up right while they root. In a couple of weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, when the plant starts to get its feet settled. Do you want to pick another plant each, the rest of you? Right, so this fern likes the shade, that'll take the shade, so it can go in this hole here. And this one, this can go in the front, it likes the light, that spot there. The ivy, so it pops over the front here. Working on is interesting, because this is a bromeliad. Remember I told you about epiphytes? Plants that grow on other plants. Well, this comes from the rainforest of South America, and you don't see that growing in the soil. You'll get that right up high in the crown of the trees. So it'll just grow on a branch somewhere else, and it has this very beautiful flower. But this flower is also very practical because what it does is it captures the water. The water will sit in here like a vase, so it never goes thirsty. You just need to loosen those roots up a bit, fella. Another little sprinkle. My eggs and bacon for plants. Do a mulch, and this is going to be on top. This makes it look very, very beautiful. So it's not just only reading. So what you do is you take your bark and you just gently, gently spread it on top of the soil. It helps keep the moisture in, helps keep the roots wet. It also means if you get weeds in there, they're much easier to pull out. Also, when it rots down, it gives the plants food. There's 3 jobs. If it gets cold in here, which it won't, but if you did it outside, it also helps protect the roots from freezing cold, frosts or anything that's too low. And final one is it looks good. Mulching, alright? Top dress mulching, that's called. Very beautiful flower, isn't it? That probably tries to attract bees or something like that, or maybe it looks like a butterfly. So whatever it's trying to attract, it wants it to come and land on here, and it'll put its face into there and get covered in pollen. And it'll fly off and probably get another one. What this is planted in. Almost just bark, look, isn't it? This will grow as an epiphyte as well normally, that's why it doesn't like heavy soil at all. Very, very strong roots, because it used to cling into other plants, you see. So what should we do with our spare soil?
Put it back. Put it back.
Put it back in the bag, that's a good idea.
Or we can put it in there. Or give it to start outside.
If you've got a compost bin, but for the moment, why don't you grab one of the old bags?
The old bag.
The compost lot in that corner, and we'll put it in there, yeah? Brilliant, mate. Good gardener's a tidy gardener.
How big will the orchid grow?
Orchids will probably not get much bigger than that, and if you can get it to flower again, I'll think you'll deserve a medal.
We will.
Yeah, that's a challenge for you. You can, they do flower again, I've got them to flower again. Yeah. They like a lot of what I'm going to do now, actually, they like being misted. You grow in the wild, they live in cloud zones, in cloud banks, quite high altitude, so you'll get a tree with many, many orchids growing on it, epiphytically, and then, because of the altitude, the clouds just wash it with fine water all the time, and the orchids just love it. It enjoys a mist, so it loves it, Imagine it's in a rainforest. Rainforests are getting wet and humid, aren't they? Have you seen a lot of houseplants? You see houseplants, you see the ends of the leaves are always brown. Have you seen that at home? That's because the plant is letting water go quicker than it's taking it up. And that's because it's not getting moisture on its leaves. What you can do also is you can add to that something called either tomato fertiliser, but my favourite is stuff called seaweed extract. And you put a little bit of that in the bottom, and you put water in, and then what happens is maybe early in the morning you spray it all over, and that gives it a really strong fertiliser. You do it early in the morning because what tends to happen is the stomata, which are the leaves on the back of the leaf, like a breathing pores, they'll be open. So the plant takes in the liquid fertiliser very, very quickly, and they will adore that. Yes, mate?
But when you spray it on the plants, won't the sun get it and burn it?
That's why it's probably best to do it early in the morning. It's a very good question. Do it early in the morning, or maybe in the evening when it's cooler. So early in the morning is a good rule for it, yeah. So you've got a little rainforest. What did we talk about at the beginning? We were talking about layers, didn't we? So you've got a higher layer, a semi-layer, and then a lower layer. And then some of this will start falling over the front as well. So it looks quite good. You've got your mulch bark on top. It makes a nice finish, doesn't it? Look good? And that will also help protect the plant's roots and help keep the moisture in. Now, there's a couple of things you've got to remember about watering and looking after them. One is, I think if you remember this is quite important, you remember the DDD rule. Remember the DDD, letter D. And that is, if you see any dead or diseased or dying material on the plant, you need to just prune it out, take it off. All gardeners call it the DDD rule. And that means that the plant stays hygienic. Most pests will attack a plant if the plant is already weak. Things about watering, people probably kill more plants by watering too much than too little. So in the summer you can water this quite regularly, every couple of days, no problem. But in the winter, you cut the watering right back, and the light level's low, the plant isn't breathing or photosynthesizing so much. It only needs much less water. So maybe in the winter, once every 2 weeks, give it a drink. Okay? You'll also like the fertiliser, or like a touch of that every 6 months. This
ivy climb up.
you can do, that one will hopefully fall. If that starts getting into these plants, then you maybe need to cut it free a little bit. But this one is a certain cultivar, which I reckon should just fall down the front. Native ivy, climb anything. Like a Spider-Man, native ivy.
So how quickly will this grow up? How big will they all get?
If in this Solardome,
yeah.
in one season you'll see a significant shift. Definitely you'll see a significant shift. In a couple of years that'll be completely filled out. That'll be like up here, I reckon. Well, thank you for your help.
Well done.
Thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome.